"Who are you?" The boy took his hand, and the pain vanished. Margaret Sullivan had taught English literature at Riverside High School for 37 years. She'd introduced thousands of teenagers to Shakespeare, Dickens, and Toni Morrison. She'd written recommendation letters that got students into Ivy League schools, stayed late to help struggling readers, and spent her own money on classroom books when the budget ran dry. Now, at 63, she lay in room 412 of Memorial Hospital, her body ravaged by ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, the disease that had stolen her movement one muscle at a time. First her legs, then her arms, then her ability to swallow. Soon, it would take her ability to breathe. The doctor said it would be weeks, maybe days. Margaret had accepted death months ago. What she couldn't accept was the cage her body had become. She could still think, still feel, still understand every word spoken around her. But she couldn't respond, couldn't move, couldn't even blink in the pattern she'd once used to communicate. The worst part was the visitors. They came with sad eyes and careful words, speaking to her like she was already gone. Her sister brought flowers and cried quietly in the corner. Former colleagues reminisced about the good old days, their voices falsely bright. Students stopped by, awkward and uncomfortable, not knowing what to say to the teacher who could no longer speak. But there was one visitor who never came: Elena Ortega. 23 years ago, Elena had been a freshman in Margaret's third-period English class. A brilliant girl with a sharp mind and sharper tongue, who wrote essays that made Margaret's heart ache with their raw honesty. Elena had been the daughter Margaret never had, the student who stayed after class to debate symbolism in The Great Gatsby, who brought Margaret coffee on exam grading days, who once told her, "You're the only person who sees me." And Margaret had betrayed her. It was this betrayal that kept Margaret tethered to life even as her body begged for release. The guilt was a weight on her chest heavier than the disease itself. Every labored breath reminded her of what she'd done, of what she'd failed to do. The boy appeared on a Wednesday night, when the hospital was quiet except for the beeping machines and distant footsteps of night nurses. Margaret's eyes, the only part of her that still moved with some control, shifted to the corner of the room where he stood. A boy of about 10 or 11, wearing worn sneakers and a green jacket too light for late autumn. His face held an impossible gentleness, and there was something about the way he looked at her that suggested he could see straight through to her soul. He walked to her bedside without sound. "Who are you?" Margaret tried to ask, but no words came. Her throat produced only a slight gurgle, and tears of frustration leaked from her eyes. The boy smiled softly. "I know you can't speak, Margaret. But I can hear you anyway. You want to know who I am." Margaret's eyes widened. How could he possibly know what she was thinking? "I'm someone who came because you're suffering," he continued, pulling up a chair. "Not just from the disease, from something much heavier." The boy reached out and placed his small hand over Margaret's heart. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. The pain, the constant burning, suffocating pain that had become her entire world, simply vanished. But more than that, she felt her chest expand freely, felt oxygen flood her lungs without effort. Her fingers twitched, her toes moved. And then she spoke. What did you do to me?" Her voice was raspy from disuse, but it was there, real, hers. "I gave you a moment," the boy said, "a moment to say what needs to be said. It won't last long, but it will last long enough." Margaret sat up, actually sat up, and looked at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. She flexed her fingers, touched her face, felt the tears on her cheeks. "I can move. I can talk. How is this possible?" "Does it matter?" The boy's ancient eyes held hers. "You don't have much time, Margaret. Not for miracles or explanations. You have time for truth. So tell me, what happened with Elena Ortega?" The name hit Margaret like a physical blow. She gasped, her temporary mobility forgotten as the old guilt crashed over her. "How do you know about Elena?" "I know about everything that weighs on people's hearts. I know about the secrets that keep them trapped,
even when their bodies are ready to let go. So tell me, Margaret's hands trembled. She looked away, toward the window where the city lights twinkled in the distance. Elena was 17. It was the spring of her senior year. She came to my classroom after school one day, and she was different, scared. She kept looking at the door like someone might walk in. Margaret paused, the memory sharp as broken glass. She told me that Mr. Caldwell, Robert Caldwell, the vice principal, had been touching her inappropriately for months, cornering her in empty hallways, making comments about her body, calling her into his office and locking the door. She said it had started after she'd gone to him for help with a scheduling conflict. The boy listened without judgment, his expression neutral but attentive. She begged me to help her. She said I was the only teacher she trusted, the only adult who would believe her. And I promised I would. I told her to write down everything that had happened, that we'd go to the principal together, that I would stand by her no matter what. But you didn't, the boy said quietly. Margaret's face crumpled. No, I didn't. What happened? That same evening, Robert Caldwell called me at home. He'd heard rumors that Elena was spreading lies about him.
He said she was a troubled girl with a history of seeking attention, that her parents were going through a difficult divorce, that she'd made similar accusations at her previous school. None of that was true, but I didn't know that then. Margaret wrapped her arms around herself, feeling cold despite the warmth of the room. He said that if I pursued this, it would destroy the school's reputation. He reminded me that I was up for department chair that year, that budget cuts were coming, that supporting a baseless accusation from a troubled student wouldn't look good for my career. And then he said something that made me realize he knew exactly what he was doing. What did he say? He said, "Margaret, you've built such a wonderful career here. It would be a shame to see it all fall apart over a misunderstanding, especially at your age. It's not easy to find good teaching positions when you're over 40. The boy nodded slowly. He threatened you. Not explicitly, but yes. And I was scared. I was 40 years old, single, no family except my sister. Teaching was my entire life. The thought of losing it, of being blacklisted, of everyone thinking I'd supported false accusations, she choked on a sob. So I went to Elena the next day, and I told her that I'd looked into it, that I couldn't find any evidence, that maybe she'd misunderstood Mr. Caldwell's intentions. And what did she say? She looked at me like I'd stabbed her in the heart. She said, "You're just like everyone else. You see me, but you don't want to see me." And then she walked out. She never spoke to me again. Margaret was crying freely now, her body shaking with sobs that she'd held in for 23 years. "What happened to her?" the boy asked. "She dropped out 2 weeks before graduation, just disappeared. I heard later that she'd run away from home, that her parents had no idea where she'd gone. I tried to find her, sent letters to her old address, but they all came back unopened. For years, I looked for her name online, hoping to find something, anything, but there was nothing. It was like she'd vanished completely." "And Robert Caldwell?" Margaret's voice turned bitter. "He retired 5 years later with a full pension and a ceremony in his honor. 3 other girls came forward after that, during his last year, but by then he was too connected, too protected. The school settled quietly, made the family sign NDAs. He got away with it, and I helped him get away with it." The boy stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "You've been carrying this for over 2 decades, he said. Every day, every night, knowing that you chose your comfort over her safety." "Yes." "And you think that's why you can't die? Because you need to make it right?" "I don't know how to make it right. Elena is gone. I don't even know if she's alive. I've lived my entire life as a coward, and now I'm dying as one too." The boy turned back to her.
"Margaret, what would you say to Elena if you could? That I'm sorry, that she was right to trust me and I failed her, that I think about her every single day, that I should have been brave, that I should have chosen her over my career, over my comfort, over everything. Margaret's voice broke. That I hope she survived, that I hope she found people who didn't fail her the way I did. The boy walked back to the bedside and sat down. What if I told you that Elena did survive? Margaret's breath caught. What? She's alive, Margaret. She lives in Portland now. She's 40 years old. She's a social worker who specializes in helping victims of sexual abuse. She helps people like the girl she once was. Margaret pressed her hands to her mouth, fresh tears streaming. She's alive. Oh God, she's alive. She's married. She has 2 adopted daughters. She's spent her life making sure that what happened to her doesn't happen to others. She's strong, Margaret, stronger than either of you knew. Does she hate me? The boy considered this. She was angry for many years, felt betrayed, but she went to therapy, worked through it. She understands now that you were scared, that systems protect predators and punish truth-tellers. She doesn't hate you, Margaret, but she's never forgotten. I need to tell her. I need her to know that I'm sorry, that I was wrong, that she deserved better. Is that why you can't let go? Because you need her forgiveness? Margaret thought about this, really thought about it. No, I don't deserve her forgiveness. I just need her to know the truth, that it wasn't her fault, that she did the right thing by trusting me, and I'm the one who failed. I need her to know that she was seen, even by someone who was too cowardly to act on it. The boy smiled, a real smile this time, warm and proud. That, Margaret, is the first honest thing you've said in 23 years. He pulled out a phone from his pocket, an impossible modern smartphone that a boy his age shouldn't have, and began typing with quick fingers. What are you doing? Sending an email from your account to Elena's work email. It will come from the hospital's Wi-Fi, time-stamped tonight. In it, you're going to tell her everything you just told me. Every word, every truth. But I can't. I don't know her email. I do. The boy handed her the phone. On the screen was a blank email, the cursor blinking in the message field. Write, Margaret. Write like you've been teaching students to write for 37 years. Write like your life depends on it, because it does. Margaret took the phone with shaking hands. For a moment, she just stared at the empty space, feeling the weight of 23 years pressing down on her. Then, she began to type. She wrote for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. She wrote about that day in the classroom, about Elena's scared eyes, about her own cowardice. She wrote about Robert Caldwell's implicit threats, about choosing career over conscience. She wrote about the guilt that had followed her every day since, about searching for Elena's name in databases and news articles, hoping to find proof that she'd survived. She wrote about the students she'd helped in the years after, the ones who came to her with problems, with fears, with secrets. She wrote about how she'd learned to be brave, but too late for the one student who'd needed her most. She wrote, "You deserved better than me. You deserved a teacher who would have burned her own career to the ground to protect you. I wasn't that teacher then. I hope, in some small way, I became her afterward. But that doesn't help you. So I'm writing to say that you were right about everything. You were seen. You were believed. You were failed by someone who should have been strong enough to stand with you. And I'm sorrier than words can ever express." When she finished, she handed the phone back to the boy with trembling hands. He read it once, nodded, and pressed send. "Will she read it?" Margaret whispered. "She'll read it tomorrow morning. And Margaret, it will matter. It won't erase what happened, but it will close a door that's been open in her heart for 23 years. She'll cry, and then she'll finally let you go." "Let me go?" The boy placed his hand over Margaret's heart again. "You've been holding on to life because you needed to tell the truth. Now you have. Your work here is done." Margaret felt it then, the fatigue that she'd been holding at bay through sheer force of will. Her temporary strength began to fade. Her fingers grew heavy. Will it hurt?
No, I'll stay with you. You won't be alone. Thank you, Margaret whispered. Thank you for giving me this chance. You gave yourself this chance by finally choosing courage over comfort. I just opened a door. Margaret lay back on the bed, feeling her body return to its frozen state. But this time, the weight on her chest was gone. The guilt had lifted. She told the truth, and Elena would know. The boy held her hand as the machines began to beat more slowly. As her breathing became shallow, he stayed there, a small figure in the dim hospital room, until her eyes closed for the last time. In Portland, Oregon, Elena Ortega woke up at 6:47 a.m. to her alarm. She went through her morning routine, made coffee, kissed her wife and daughters goodbye, and drove to her office at the Crisis Intervention Center. She opened her email at 8:15 a.m. The subject line read, "The truth I should have told you 23 years ago." Elena stared at the sender, Margaret Sullivan, sent from Memorial Hospital at 2:34 a.m. She almost deleted it, almost didn't read it, but something made her click. She read the entire message 3 times, crying harder with each reading. All the anger she thought she'd processed came rushing back, but with it came something else: validation.
Closure. The knowledge that she hadn't imagined it, hadn't deserved it, hadn't been wrong to trust. That afternoon, Elena called the hospital. The nurse told her that Margaret Sullivan had passed away peacefully at 4:17 a.m. She wasn't in any pain, the nurse said. It was like she just let go. Elena hung up and sat in her office for a long time, staring at the email on her screen. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She pulled out the journal she'd kept in high school, the one where she'd written about Mrs. Sullivan, about how much she'd admired her, about how betrayed she'd felt. She wrote one final entry. "You finally chose me. Thank you for that. Rest in peace, Mrs. Sullivan. I forgive you." She never told anyone about the email, about the impossible timing, about the closure that arrived exactly when she needed it most. But sometimes, late at night when she's working on a difficult case, when a victim comes to her scared and alone, she thinks about Margaret Sullivan, about courage that comes too late, about the importance of choosing victims over institutions, truth over comfort, justice over career. And she thinks about the mysterious email sent from a dying woman's hospital room in the middle of the night, typed by hands that shouldn't have been able to move. She never questions how it was possible. Some miracles don't need explanations. Some angels come disguised as boys with ancient eyes, taking our hands, lifting our pain, giving us one last chance to tell the truth that sets us free. "Who are you?" Margaret had asked. "Someone who came because you're suffering," he'd answered. And that was enough. That was everything.